2 hours after burying my 8-year-old son, my phone rang with a call that changed my life forever. The shaking voice of his teacher could barely hold together as she told me, "Ma'am, I found something you have to see for yourself. Come to the school right now and meet me in the teacher's lounge. Don't tell your family or anyone else. This is dangerous." When I finally got to the school, the person I saw standing in front of the door made me shake from head to toe. I never could have guessed that the person trapping the teacher inside was my own husband. But before we get to that moment, let me start at the beginning. And as the storyteller of my channel always used to say, before the story starts, leave a comment telling us which city you're listening from. And don't forget to like and subscribe so this story reaches more people. 2 hours after laying my son Zion to rest, the house felt like a very sad and cold place. The strong smell of lilies and funeral flowers mixed with the smell of wet dirt on the bottom of my black dress. People kept walking in and out of the living room, saying kind words that sounded empty and far away, as if they were talking from the other end of a tunnel. They said I had to accept God's plan, that Zion was at peace in heaven now. But none of those words could ease the pain tearing my chest apart, as if someone were ripping it open from the inside. Zion was only 8. He was a healthy, active boy, always running from one place to another with an energy that made you happy. The doctor had said it was a major heart attack, a rare case, something unusual. I didn't believe it, but I didn't have the strength left to fight. I hid in my bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the framed photo where Zion smiled proudly, holding a track and field trophy in his hands. Beside my husband Marcellus was greeting and saying goodbye to visitors with red eyes, a swollen face and drooping shoulders, looking as if he carried the weight of the world on his back. Everyone praised Marcellus's strength. They said he was a perfect husband and an amazing father who stayed strong only to help his broken wife. Through the half-open bedroom door, I saw him hugging Mr. Sterling, the president of the foundation where Zion went to school. The older man was patting him firmly on the back, giving comfort like a father consoling a son. That scene should have touched me, but something in my stomach twisted. A wave of sickness I couldn't explain. That was when my phone resting on the bedspread began to vibrate. The lit-up screen showed the name of Miss Vanna, Zion's teacher. I frowned. Why was she calling me at a time like this? She had been at the funeral. I had seen her crying by the coffin myself. With a shaky hand I slid my finger over the green button and brought the phone to my ear. The voice on the other end was so quiet it sounded like a whisper full of fear. Vanna's breathing was uneven, as if she were hiding in a dark closet. She asked me to listen carefully, saying she couldn't repeat herself. She said she had found something I needed to see for myself, something that had been left forgotten in the drawer of Zion's desk. Her voice broke when she begged me to come to the school right away and wait for her in the teacher's lounge. She stressed a rule that froze my blood. I was not to tell anyone, not even my family. She repeated that it was dangerous, that I couldn't trust anyone. For her, I felt my heart start to pound with uncontrollable force. The sadness that had frozen me suddenly turned into a sharp alertness that cut through the fog of pain. There was something urgent, something dark related to my son. I felt it in the way Vanna breathed on the other end of the line, in the hidden panic of her words. My mother's instinct, the one that until then had only hit a wall of helplessness in the face of death, woke up with brutal clarity. I wiped my tears away with the back of my hand, forced myself to stand up, and took a deep breath. Had to go. I had to know what was so dangerous about what she had found. I walked out of the room, dragging my feet, pretending a tiredness even heavier than what I truly felt. Approached Marcellus, who was still talking to Mr. Sterling on the porch. I whispered that I had a terrible headache, that I needed to go to the corner store to get my migraine medicine because I had left it in the car, and that I wanted to get some fresh air. Marcellus looked at me with a kindness that would have convinced anyone. He offered to go in my place, but I softly said no, telling him I needed 15 minutes alone to clear my head. Mr. Sterling smiled, advising me not to take too long, that the night breeze wasn't good for someone so weak. I agreed with a nod and headed toward my car. As I drove toward Zion's school, the city seemed to stretch out forever. A light rain began to fall, making the street shine with the yellow reflections of the streetlights. My mind was a whirlwind. Had Vanna found? Why was she so scared? And why did she tell me not to talk to Marcellus? Until that moment he had been a perfect father, caring, patient, dedicated. I told myself over and over that he couldn't be part of anything dangerous. However, a small seed of doubt began to grow, slow and stubborn like roots cracking through concrete. Scenes from the last few months that I hadn't wanted to look at too closely came rushing back. Zion's stomach aches, his sudden tiredness, the afternoons he fell asleep in random places. I remembered how Marcellus insisted on personally giving him his medicine, and how angry he got when I suggested taking the boy to a doctor other than the family doctor, that distant cousin of Mr. Sterling, who they said knew Zion's story better than anyone. All of that, which until then had just been background noise, began to line up in my memory like pieces of an evil puzzle. The school looked scary at night. The main gate was open, as if someone had left it that way on purpose. I didn't see the security guard in his booth. Maybe he was walking around. Or maybe there was simply no night guard because classes were stopped after Zion's death. I parked the car far away under the shadow of a huge oak tree so no one would recognize the vehicle from the street. Ran across the yard in the rain with my heart pounding in my throat and headed toward the building, where the teacher's lounge was located on the second floor. The hallway on that floor was completely dark, lit only by the faint light coming up from the outside gardens. But I could see a line of light escaping from under the lounge door. It was open a few inches. Vanna must be inside. I walked faster, but the closer I got, the heavier the air felt. My whole body told me something wasn't right. The silence was so thick that only my steps, made louder by the tiles, could be heard. Zion's voice came to mind, telling me how kind Miss Vanna was, how much he loved her. If she had reached this point of fear, it had to be something very serious. I stopped in front of the half-open door and held my breath before looking inside. What I saw froze my heart. Miss Vanna was trapped near the filing cabinets. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror, and her whole body was shaking like a leaf. She had her hands up in a begging way, as if asking for mercy. In front of her, with his back to me, stood a man in a black shirt that I knew very well. His posture, the way he leaned on one leg, even the light smell of his cologne drifting into the hallway, were terribly familiar. The man held a small black object in his hand, a thing that looked like a USB drive or a portable disk. He was speaking to Vanna in a low voice, full of threat, a cold, sharp voice without a bit of kindness. It was a voice so different from the one I heard every day at home that for a second I refused to believe it. I pushed the door gently. The hinges squeaked, giving away that I was there. The man turned around right away, alert, and the white neon light lit up his face completely. My legs felt weak, and I had to grab the door frame to keep from falling. It was Marcellus, my husband, the father of my son who was just buried. Marcellus looked at me without shock, as if he had guessed from the start the chance that I might show up there. His face, which a moment before had been pure ice, slowly changed into a mask of held-back pain, the same one he had worn all day in front of family and friends. He hid the black device, sliding it to his side, trying to keep it from my view. I looked at Vanna, who was now crying quietly, her lips shaking and her hands still up. My mind refused to understand. Marcellus was supposed to be at home with people, crying with me. What was he doing here? Why was he threatening our son's teacher? What was on that device that was so important? The silence became smothering. Could hear the hum of the air conditioner and Vanna's soft held-back sobs. Marcellus broke the tension, walking toward me with a calm step, like someone standing in front of a scared animal trying to calm it. His face changed again, becoming that of a weak husband, broken by sadness. He opened his arms as if to hug me, and with a rough voice, said he didn't think I would come to the school. He said he had only come because he couldn't stand being at home, surrounded by memories of Zion. He said he had gone to get the boys' things, that he wanted to keep them safe, before the cleaning people emptied the desks the next day. His explanation sounded reasonable, almost touching, and if I hadn't seen what happened a few seconds earlier, I might have fallen into his arms without asking anything. But the picture of Vanna, trapped with fear in her eyes, stayed stuck in my brain. I looked for the teacher's gaze. I needed proof, a bit of truth among so many lies. Vanna was shaking. Her eyes moved from Marcellus to me as if she were at a deadly crossroad. When Marcellus looked at her sideways with that threatening glint I had never seen before, she quickly nodded. With a broken voice she confirmed his story. Yes, Marcellus came to get Zion's things. We were remembering what a good boy he was. I knew she was lying. The cold sweat running down her temple, her fingers gripping the bottom of her skirt until her knuckles turned white. It all gave her away. Marcellus slid his arm around my shoulders and squeezed too hard with an pushiness that hurt. He said we should go back home, that it wasn't good for me to be in a place that only reopened the wound for so long. On the table sat a cardboard box with drawings, notebooks, and some of Zion's pencils. With a nearly invisible move, Marcellus tucked the small black object into his pants pocket. He thought I wouldn't notice, but I saw it clearly. Before leaving, he walked toward the door first. In that tiny instant, Vanna rushed toward me. She pretended to fix my hijab, which was a little crooked from the rain, and her freezing fingers touched my neck. I felt her slide something inside the fold of the fabric near my shoulder. Her eyes locked onto mine. In them, I saw a desperate plea and an urgent warning. Her lips moved, without making a sound, but I could clearly read the words she formed. Run! My heart raced. I forced myself to look calm. I nodded as if thanking her for the gesture and took a step back. Marcellus turned around, watching us with some suspicion. He asked what we were saying. I answered quickly that Vanna was just asking me to be strong, to pray and to take care of my health. He seemed to believe it. He took my hand and we left the room, leaving Vanna behind, alone in the middle of that silent room, stiff as a wax statue, about to melt from the heat of fear. The drive back was a trip toward an invisible punishment. Marcellus drove with careful calm, wiping his eyes every now and then like someone drying tears. He put on classical music quietly, the same kind he used to listen to when he wanted to relax. But to me it sounded like the funeral song of my own. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the rain hit the window harder and harder. I felt the folded paper in the fold of my hijab as if it were a burning rock. I wanted to read it right then, but I was afraid Marcellus would notice. I looked at him sideways. The man I had been married to for 10 years suddenly seemed like a total stranger. I went over the last few months in my mind again. Zion's complaints of stomach pain, his sudden weakness, the long naps that weren't normal for a healthy child, and especially Marcellus's insistence that only the family's trusted doctor could treat him. Something horrible was taking shape in my mind. When we got home, the air was quieter. Most of the people mourning had left. Only a few relatives remained, putting chairs away in the backyard. I said I felt dizzy and needed to lie down. Marcellus offered to make me some hot tea, but I said that I just wanted to sleep. I went into the bedroom, locked the door, and leaned my back against it, trying to control my breathing. I waited until I heard his footsteps moving away toward the kitchen. Then with shaking hands, I took out the little paper hidden in my hijab. It was a page torn from a school notebook with quick, almost illegible handwriting. I read it under the dim light of the bedside lamp. Zion didn't have heart problems. They changed his medicine for small amounts of poison, checked the teddy bear in his room. He recorded something before he died. Be careful. Your husband is dangerous. The world crashed down on me. My knees lost their strength, and I let myself fall to the floor. My baby, my little Zion, hadn't died of a strange sickness. They had poisoned him little by little, and the person who had done it was in my kitchen right now, making tea, pretending to be a broken father. Unbearable pain that had torn me apart until then changed into something harder and sharper. Rage. My tears dried right away. I understood that crying could wait. What couldn't wait was the truth. I got up as best I could and tiptoed out of the room, going to Zion's bedroom, which was next to the master bedroom. Opened the door carefully. The smell of baby cologne and lotion still floated in the air. Familiar, it squeezed my heart. Everything was just as he had left it. The building blocks on the floor, the superhero posters on the walls, the storybooks scattered on the nightstand. Sitting on the bed was his big brown teddy bear, the one he hugged every night to sleep, the gift I had given him 2 years ago. For his birthday. I went to the bear and touched its soft fur with shaking hands. I noticed something odd on its back, a seam that was a little thick, as if someone had opened and closed it in a hurry with messy stitches. Remembered that he had been taught to sew at school and sometimes practiced on his toys. I went to the desk, opened a drawer, and took out a nail clipper with a small metal file. I went back to the bear and started to unstitch it. Carefully. Among the white fluff stuffing appeared a small digital recorder, a spy toy that my friend Khalil had given him a long time ago. Zion loved playing detective. Felt a chill as I pressed the play button. Zion's voice sounded weak and hoarse, very different from the happy one that used to fill the house. Today my tummy hurt again after Dad gave me the red medicine. Tastes really bitter, not like the one Mom gives me. Scared to tell Mom. Dad gets mad like that one time. Dad says it's a super vitamin to make me strong, but I feel worse every time. The audio kept going with the sound of a door opening and heavy footsteps coming closer. Then I clearly heard Marcellus's voice talking on the phone with someone. His tone was calm, almost bored. Don't worry, Mr. Sterling. Already upped the dose. The kid won't make it to next week. As soon as he dies, his grandfather's inheritance money is released to the guardian's account, meaning mine. Then we split it 50-50 like we agreed. You just make sure the paperwork for the foundation property is ready to change names. The recording cut off. The silence in the room became deafening. I covered my mouth with both hands to hold back a scream that was fighting to get out. Everything was spinning. My husband, the man with whom I had shared 10 years of life, had poisoned our son to keep the inheritance. Money my father had left in Zion's name. And the respectable Mr. Sterling, president of the Educational Foundation, was his partner in crime. They were monsters, not men. At that moment, the door knob of the room began to wiggle. Someone was trying to come in, but I had locked it. Amara. I heard Marcellus's voice on the other side. Why is the door locked? Are you in there? Open it. His tone was no longer that of a sweet husband. There was hardness, suspicion, a hidden threat. He banged on the door. Again and again. Open up, Amara. Don't make me break it down. I backed away, holding the bear and the recorder against my chest. I was trapped. My son's killer was on the other side of the door. And the most terrifying part was that he knew I already knew his secret. The blows against the door became brutal. Each hit made the pictures on the wall shake. Marcellus was screaming my name with a voice twisted by rage and panic, a roar that mixed desperation and cruelty. Knew that as soon as he got in, my life would be hanging by a thread. Marcellus was no longer my husband. He was a trapped animal, ready to destroy anything that could show what he did. I tucked the recorder into the inside pocket of my tunic. The only thing I now had to demand justice. I had to find another way out. The door was not an option. Only the window was left. Zion's room was on the second floor. I remembered the sycamore tree growing next to the house, with its thick branches reaching quite close to the room's small balcony. More than once I had scolded Zion for daring to climb it. Now that child's mischief could save my life. I ran to the window, unlocked the latch with trembling hands, and threw it open. The night air, heavy with rain, hit my face like a bucket of ice water. Outside, the storm had gotten worse. Lightning lit up the garden for split seconds. Thunder covered the blows Marcellus was dealing to the door. The cracking of wood warned me the door wouldn't hold much longer. Without giving myself time to think, I climbed onto the balcony railing and felt for a branch of the tree with my foot. It was wet and slippery, but it was that or die in there. I jumped, holding onto the branch with both hands. The rough bark scratched my palms, but I held on. My wet tunic got caught on a thin branch. I pulled with all my strength until I heard the sound of fabric ripping. It didn't matter. The only important thing was getting down. Just as my feet finally touched the muddy grass of the garden, I heard a crash upstairs. Marcellus had broken down the bedroom door. I looked up and saw him in the doorway, lit by the overhead light. He ran to the balcony and leaned out, searching the darkness, cursing loudly. Pressed myself against the tree trunk, holding my breath. A flash of lightning lit up the yard for a second. If he had looked down at that moment, he would have seen me. But the curtain of rain made it hard to see, and furious, he went back inside the room, maybe thinking I was still hiding in there. I didn't waste a second. Barefoot with my feet sinking into the mud, I slipped along the side wall of the house and headed for the back garden gate, the one the gardener used. I knew that as soon as Marcellus found out I wasn't in the room, he would search the whole house and then come out looking for me. I had to put as much distance as possible between us before he woke the security guards or called any of his contacts. Mr. Sterling had friends everywhere. I no longer knew who I could trust. Every shadow seemed like an enemy. Every tree trunk a figure, waiting. With my heart racing and tears mixing with the rain on my face, I managed to open the small back gate and stepped out onto the dark path that ran behind the neighborhood. There was no one there. I ran without looking back, the recorder held tight in my pocket until I reached a main road about a mile away. My phone, wet in my pocket, vibrated several times. Assumed it was Marcellus. I refused to answer. I couldn't give him even the smallest clue of where I was. Taking shelter under the roof of a closed shop, gasping for air, I took out my phone with fingers numb from the cold. I saw 10 missed calls from Marcellus. Ignored them and searched for a name in my contact list. Khalil, my best friend since high school, the only person I could trust, an investigative reporter, stubborn and used to dealing with bad cases. I dialed his number with shaking hands, praying he wasn't asleep. It rang a couple of times and then I heard his sleepy voice. Amara. What happened? I couldn't give too many details. With my voice broken by crying, I barely managed to whisper. Khalil, help me. Marcellus killed Zion. I'm near the gas station on the highway. Come get me. Don't ask anything, right? Well, just come fast. I hung up before he could react and turned off the phone so no one could find my location. I curled up in a dark corner next to the shop's metal shutter, hugging my knees, shaking with fear and cold, hoping Khalil would arrive before Marcellus found me. 15 minutes felt like 15 years. Every car light coming close made my heart stop for A moment, expecting to see Marcellus's black SUV. But finally an old gray car stopped in front of me. The passenger window rolled down, and I saw Khalil's worried face. I jumped up and got into the car without saying a word, slamming the door shut. I must have looked pitiful, soaked, covered in mud. Total mess. My hands scratched and my face pale as a ghost. Khalil shot me a quick look. He understood the situation was serious and sped off without asking questions. Inside the car, the warmth of the heater made me shiver even more. It wasn't just cold. It was my body letting go of the adrenaline. Khalil handed me his jacket from the back seat and covered my shoulders. He drove with one hand while squeezing mine with the other, trying to give me calm. I started telling him everything from Miss Vanna's call, the scene at the school, Marcellus's double life to the recording hidden in Zion's bear. Every word was like spitting out broken glass. When I played the audio, he pulled the car over to the side of the road and listened carefully, his face changing as the words from Marcellus and Mr. Sterling came out of the small device. When it finished, he hit the steering wheel in anger, letting out curses against Marcellus and Sterling. Then he listened to the recording again, but this time with the cool mind of a reporter. He said it was very strong proof but also very dangerous. Mr. Sterling wasn't just anybody. He had political power, friends in the police, and surely expensive lawyers. If we just walked into a local police station, the recorder could disappear, or worse, they could silence us before we opened our mouths. He decided to take me to a safe place, a small apartment on the edge of the city that had belonged to his late uncle, a place not even his family knew he still used sometimes. The apartment would become our shelter and planning center. On the way, Khalil turned on the radio to break the heavy silence. At first traffic news played, then the announcer cut in with an urgent news flash. The lifeless body of a woman has been found in the yard of an elementary school on Magnolia Street. The victim has been named as a teacher, initials VS. The early guess points to a possible suicide after jumping from the third floor of the school building. Felt the blood stop moving. I started screaming inside the car. Vanna, they killed her. Marcellus and Mr. Sterling killed her, and now they say it was suicide. The guilt hit me with a force worse than any physical blow. If I had gone earlier, if I had tried to get her out of the school with me, maybe she would still be alive. But I had left her there alone in front of those monsters. Cried with my whole body hitting the dashboard. Khalil pulled over, turned off the engine, and hugged me tightly, letting me let out that impossible pain. In the middle of my crying, something inside me changed. The pain stopped crushing me and hardened into a cold, sharp decision. My tears dried up. I pulled away from Khalil and stared at the dark road ahead. I remembered Vanna's look when she whispered, "Run." She couldn't have died for nothing. Neither could Zion. It wasn't enough for Marcellus and Sterling to go to jail. Well, that would be too easy for them. They had to feel fear, helplessness, shame. They had to see their lives ruined just as they had ruined mine. I looked at Khalil with a new resolve. Told him with a calm that even scared me that I didn't just want legal justice. Wanted to ruin those men's lives down to the roots. Make them breathe the same terror they made Zion and Vanna live through. Khalil held my gaze for a few seconds and nodded silently, accepting that dark promise between the two of us. We decided not to go to the police yet. Before that, we needed more proof, something so undeniable that neither power nor lawyers could knock it down. The recording alone could be called a fake. We needed to get the bottle of poison Marcellus had used on Zion, the physical evidence of the crime. We were sure he wouldn't destroy it right away because of pride, because of too much confidence that he wouldn't get caught, or simply by mistake. That night in the dusty little apartment, we stopped being victims and became hunters. I cut my hair to my shoulders, threw away my torn black dress, and put on simple clothes that had belonged to Khalil's uncle. A Obedient Tamara, the quiet wife, had died with my son. Dawn was just breaking when we sat down to plan my return to the snake's nest, not as a sorry wife, but as a ghost coming to dig up their secrets. We knew Marcellus worked as the director of operations in the office building of Sterling's foundation. Every Friday, an outside cleaning company did a deep clean of the offices. That would be my way in. Khalil, an expert at getting into places he wasn't invited, got into the cleaning company's computer system and signed me up on the temporary staff list with a fake name. He turned me into Sadia, a cleaning worker with a badge and a uniform. In front of the bathroom mirror in the apartment, I tied a dark blue hijab, one of those practical ones used by women working long hours, and put on the light blue uniform, a little too big for me. Put on thick-rimmed glasses and powdered my face unevenly, making my features dull. The woman looking back was no longer Amara. She was someone else. Khalil parked the car 2 blocks from the foundation's office building. I got out pushing a cart with buckets, brooms, and mops, blending in with the rest of the cleaning staff entering through the service door. The guard barely looked at. He didn't even look up to check our faces. We, the people at the bottom, are invisible. I passed the security check without a problem using the copied card Khalil had made from a careless employee. I took the service elevator up to the 12th floor where Marcellus's office was located. The hallway was carpeted, silent and cold. Pushed the cart to the double door with the sign, Director of Operations. I swiped the card through the reader. The light turned green and the lock clicked. I went in. The office was big and fancy with dark wood furniture and a large window overlooking part of the city. On the wall behind the desk hung a photograph of us, Marcellus, Zion, and me, smiling in a park. Wanted to rip it down with my nails. Marcellus hadn't hung that photo out of love, but as part of his mask of the perfect family man. I knew because I had seen it once by accident that behind an abstract painting on another wall was a hidden safe. I moved the painting carefully and there was the digital panel. I swallowed hard. The code was Zion's birthday. The irony made me sick. I typed in 1703, and the green light came on. I opened the safe, expecting to find the bottle of poison. It wasn't there. There were stacks of cash, papers for property in Marcellus's name, passports with different stamps, papers moving, foundation land to private accounts. It was pure corruption, but it still didn't prove murder. I took pictures with the tiny camera hidden in one of my buttons, one by one, leaving nothing unrecorded. Then I heard laughter and footsteps coming closer down the hall. Panic hit me like a heat wave. I closed the safe, hung the painting back up a little crooked from rushing, and hid behind a large sofa near the desk, pretending to clean the baseboards. The door opened. Marcellus and a young woman, very dressed up in a tight dress and high heels, walked in. It was Sarah, his secretary, whom I had always seen getting too close to him. They didn't notice me, hidden by the height of the sofa back and the shadow of a filing cabinet. What I heard next burned me from the inside. Marcellus didn't seem like a sad man. He was laughing with Sarah while pouring whiskey into 2 glasses. Sat in a flirty way on the edge of the desk and stroked his arm. They talked about Zion's death as if talking about the good end of a business deal. Sarah told him his acting at the funeral had been perfect, that even Mr. Sterling had been impressed with his sad father act. Marcellus was proud of himself, saying that getting rid of that sickly kid had been the best thing for his future. He called him a burden, a source of costs that stopped the inheritance money from flowing into his hands. I felt my nails digging into my I wanted to come out and beat them up, but I knew I would lose. Instead, I turned on the small recording microphone I had in my pants pocket and let every word of that conversation be recorded. They talked about a trip to Europe they planned to take when everything calmed down and the millions hit his account. They made fun of me, my desperate running away. Marcellus said they wouldn't take long to find my dead body lying around somewhere, that everyone would believe I had gone crazy from sadness. He called me weak, useless without him. And there's nothing they can prove, he added, kissing Sarah's temple. I already sent the poison bottle to be burned with the medical waste. This morning. No trace left. That sentence was a low blow. The bottle, our hope, no longer existed. But we got something just as powerful. An arrogant mission. The confession that they believed they had won. When they finally left for lunch, I waited several minutes inside my hiding place until I was sure. Before leaving, I took out of my pocket the toy car Zion used to carry in his backpack, something I had kept since the night before, and left it in the middle of the desk, right on top of Marcellus's neat files, so he would know his past was coming for him. I went back to the apartment with Khalil and we listened to the recording together. Khalil had to go out to the balcony to smoke so he wouldn't explode. He knew the audio was devastating, but it was still the result of an illegal recording and they could try to throw it out in court. We needed them to ruin themselves in public, to betray each other in front of witnesses, cameras and microphones. The best way to make a criminal make mistakes is to cause fear. And we knew that Marcellus, cold as he was, had a crack. The terror of ghosts, of karma, of punishment from things he couldn't control. Years ago, when we were newly married, he had confessed to me that ghost stories scared him, that he was obsessed with the idea that bad deeds came back, multiplied. He had tried to drown that fear in disbelief and money, but it was still there. Khalil had managed to get into the smart home system of our house. Lights, cameras, sound, air conditioning, everything Marcellus installed to feel safe. We would use it to drive him crazy. That same night, the haunting began. From the laptop screen, we watched on the living room camera as he poured himself drink after drink, uneasy, playing with Zion's toy car that someone had left on his office desk. At midnight, Khalil made the living room lights flicker. Marcellus got up confused and went to check the switches. When he seemed to calm down, he went up to the bedroom. We lowered the air conditioning temperature to 60 degrees. We saw him shiver in bed, uncovered. Then through the ceiling speakers we played a soft little giggle of Zion's mixed with the white noise of the fan. Marcellus sat up right away, eyes wide, looking for where the sound came from. He asked out loud who was there. We cut the sound. We repeated the game the next few nights, increasing the intensity little by little. We never let him sleep for more than a short while a day. On the third day, while he was showering, we filled the bathroom with a recording of Zion's whimpers when his stomach hurt. That piece that had also been on the small recorder. Echo on the tiles made it sound ghostly. Marcellus came out of the bathroom, slipping, holding onto the furniture, soaking wet, and with his face white as paper. He started screaming for them to leave him alone, that it wasn't possible. Blaming Sarah was his next step. He began calling her nervously, accusing her of playing cruel jokes. Distrust started to grow between them. The high point of our plan happened at the same time as the Foundation's gala, which would be held at a fancy hotel. Mr. Sterling would give a speech and Marcellus would be given an award as an amazing father for still supporting the institution despite the tragedy. The name of the award made me sick. Khalil found a way into the hotel's Wi-Fi network and got into the projection and sound system. They had planned an emotional video with photos of Zion. We prepared a very different one, a collection of their own rottenness. The night of the event, Khalil and I watched everything from a van parked in the lot with several screens connected to the hotel cameras. We saw Marcellus enter, next to Mr. Sterling. Marcellus looked ruined, tired, hunched over, turning his head every so often, as if he was afraid of finding a ghost behind him. Sarah was there too, beautiful but annoyed, dealing with his mood swings. When Marcellus went up on the stage to get the award, the people clapped. He took the microphone and started talking about how much he missed his son. With a broken tone he had also practiced. I gave the signal to Khalil. The giant screen behind Marcellus, which was supposed to show an animation with Zion's smiling face filled with white noise and a sharp screech, went through the speakers. Then the image changed to a bright red background and huge letters appeared as if written in blood. "I know what you did." The ballroom went completely quiet. Marcellus turned pale as a dead body. That moment we played through the speakers the recording of his conversation with Sarah, the one where he called Zion a sickly kid and bragged about destroying the poison bottle. The people there were left with their mouths open. Exclamations were heard, chairs scraping, angry whispers. Sarah stood up swaying, about to faint. Mr. Sterling stood up, red with rage and shame. Marcellus tried to take control of the microphone, shouting that it was all a trick, that they were lying about him, but his voice was drowned out by the wave of angry words and camera flashes. The worst for him came when he saw Mr. Sterling whisper something to the head of security. He understood in a second that they planned to use him as the one to blame, leave him alone facing the public to save the Foundation's image. "You!" Marcellus shouted from the stage, pointing at Sterling. "It was you who planned everything. The inheritance, splitting the money, the poison. If I go down, you go down with me." That accusation, captured by cell phones and TV cameras, would be impossible to erase. The gala turned into chaos. Marcellus escaped through the service exit, chased by reporters. Sterling tried to control the situation, but the scandal had already broken loose on social media. The video went viral in a matter of hours. But we knew it wasn't enough. Lawyers could say it was stress, a delusion, a digital fake. We needed a final, clearer scene with them describing their crimes themselves while someone listened officially. That night we went back to the apartment without celebrating. We knew a hurt animal is a dangerous animal. Marcellus was now hated by society but still free. Sterling was trapped but with resources. The next part of the plan was to turn the two against each other, making them believe the other was betraying them. Khalil prepared 2 cheap phones impossible to track. One we pretended to be Marcellus and texted Sterling. "I have signed copies of all the papers about stealing the money. If you don't help me get out of the city tonight and give me my share, they go to the district attorney tomorrow. Meet me at the Foundation's old warehouse at the docks at 2 a.m. alone, or we sink together." We knew Sterling was paranoid and wouldn't dare ignore that threat. The other phone, we pretended to be a messenger of Sterling and sent a message to Marcellus. "Mr. Sterling wants to fix. He has prepared a boat to get you out of the country tonight. He wants you to bring all the papers and proof. You have to destroy them. He waits for you at 2 a.m. at the Foundation's old warehouse at the docks. The police are already moving. It's now or never. Don't be late." Marcellus, desperate without anyone to help him, and sure the whole world was chasing him, would see that message as his last chance. At 2 a.m., under heavy rain, Khalil and I were already inside the warehouse on a metal platform on the 2nd floor with a perfect view of the main area. It was a big empty building near the dock. It smelled of rust and old seawater. Khalil had put hidden cameras and microphones connected to a safe computer that a friend of his in the Major Crimes Unit also had access to. This time the police knew. They knew too. Dangerous men were meeting there to talk about dirty money. They just had to wait for them to say enough and then go in. Black car arrived first. We saw Sterling get out with a briefcase and 2 bodyguards. He left them outside, signaling them to wait. He entered the warehouse with his right hand inside his jacket. It wasn't hard to guess he was holding a gun. His face was like stone, tight with rage and fear. Minutes later, the door creaked again. Marcellus came in from the darkness. He wore a wrinkled shirt, his eyes lost. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. He walked toward Sterling with a mix of hope and hate. "Where's the boat?" he asked with a broken voice. "You said you'd get me out of here." Sterling let out a dry laugh. "Boat? Do you really? Think after what you did at the hotel. I'm going to help you escape. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You're a problem." Marcellus looked at him with disbelief. "But you sent me a message." "I didn't send you anything," Sterling interrupted him. "The only message I got was yours, threatening me with the papers." "Brought them. Give them to me, and maybe I'll think about letting your dead body show up whole, not in pieces and bags." Marcellus's confusion turned into fury. He understood someone else was pulling the strings, but his hatred toward Sterling was stronger than his will to survive. "So, you're going to kill me like we killed Zion," he spat. "Go ahead. But remember, you're just as guilty as I am. You got me the poison. You told me to increase the dose. You did it to cover your gambling debts. Don't you dare point at me. You were the father." Sterling roared. "You put the poison in his mouth every night. I just told you to fix the inheritance problem. Don't act like a saint, you old liar," Marcellus shouted. "We're the same garbage." Every word was being recorded by the microphones and sent live to Khalil's police friend. There was no room for doubt. There they were, admitting their part in the murder of a child and the stealing of money. Suddenly, Sterling pulled out his gun and aimed it at Marcellus's head. "It's over. Goodbye. You useless fool." Before he could shoot, police sirens broke the silence of the night. Red and blue lights filtered through the cracks of the warehouse. A voice over a loudspeaker ordered them to drop their weapons and give up. Sterling jumped, looking toward the entrance. Marcellus used that distraction to jump at him. Two rolled on the floor. The gun flew into a corner where it was out of reach for both. From our hiding place, we watched the brutal fight. Marcellus, younger and stronger, hit Sterling over and over until he knocked him out. But he had no plan to give up. He stood up unsteadily and looked around for a way out. His eyes lifted toward the platform where we were. A glint on the camera lens gave away our presence. Eyes met. For the first time since I ran from home, Marcellus saw me. The blue hijab had slipped, leaving my face visible. His features twisted into a face of pure hatred. "Amara!" he roared, finally recognizing the ghost haunting him. Crazy with rage, he charged up the stairs, ignoring the shouts of the police who were already coming in through another door. Khalil grabbed my arm. "Run," he told me. Through the roof door. We came out onto the warehouse roof under pouring rain. The wind almost knocked us over. From there we could see the dock and some police cars below. On the other side of the building was a metal fire escape leading down to a landing. We headed for it, but the roof door flew open with a Marcellus appeared with a metal bar in his hand, bleeding from his head, eyes wide and wild. Khalil stepped in, trying to stop him. Marcellus gave a brutal blow to his arm with the bar. I heard a horrible crack. Khalil fell to the ground, screaming in pain, holding his limp arm. I ran toward him, but Marcellus grabbed me by the hijab and yanked me backward. I felt my scalp burn with pain. He dragged me toward the edge of the roof, using me as a shield when he saw several police officers trying to come up the other side. "One more step and I throw her," he screamed, pressing the bar against my neck. The officer stopped. The rain soaked us all. I breathed with difficulty, feeling the cold metal on my throat, but I wasn't afraid like before. I was done. Marcellus forced me down the fire escape with him. We reached an old SUV parked between shipping containers, surely stolen. He pushed me into the passenger seat, tied my hands to the roof handle with his own tie, and sat at the wheel. He sped off, like a madman, knocking down the fence, and getting onto the road with several police cars behind us. The police cars followed with sirens screaming. Marcellus drove as if he didn't care about his life or mine. He ran red lights, hit mirrors of other cars, hit puddles that made us skid dangerously. I slammed my shoulder against the door trying to break free, but the tie was too tight. "You're not going to escape," I said, my voice hoarse. "Shut up," he muttered. "I'm not going back to being poor. Not going to rot in jail. We're going far away. Do you understand, Amara? Far away." He took a highway that was being built. The ground was slippery from the rain, and the road narrowed because of cement blocks. Ahead, flashes of police cars could be seen blocking our path. Marcellus jerked the steering wheel to avoid the roadblock, but the car lost traction. The world spun several times. The vehicle skidded, hit the sidewall sideways, and crashed. The airbags opened. I felt a sharp hit on my head and a burning pain in my temple. Dizzy, I could see Marcellus beside me, bleeding from his nose with one leg, trapped in the wrecked dashboard. Even so, he kept moving. He stumbled open the door and dragged me out, gripping me by the wrists. Outside, the rain kept falling without mercy. He pulled us close to the edge of the highway, where only a few steps separated us from the drop. Below, the dark current of a city river roared. Several police cars surrounded the vehicle, pointing their weapons at us. Marcellus pressed a piece of broken glass to my neck, right over an artery. I felt the sharp point cut my skin and a trickle of warm blood slide down my collarbone. The police shouted at him to calm down, to let me go. The negotiator spoke through a loudspeaker, trying to buy time. Marcellus, out of his mind, demanded a helicopter, money, a clear way out. It was crazy. He knew he had no way out, but he held on to that dream like a drowning man to a branch. Heard him breathing heavily right behind me, the glass pressing into my throat. And yet, in that moment, my mind filled with strange calm. I stopped trembling. I saw his reflection in a puddle. The man I had loved was unrecognizable, eaten up by greed and fear. Thought of Zion, of his small body in the coffin, of Vanna falling from the third floor of the school. They hadn't had I still did. I glanced quickly down at his feet. Marcellus's right leg was clearly hurt. The torn pant fabric showed deep cuts, blood mixed with dirty water. That was his weak. I gathered all the strength I had left. I took a deep breath, not caring that the glass cut a little deeper. Suddenly, I whipped my head back and bit the forearm holding the glass. With all my built-up rage, I sank my teeth into his skin until I tasted blood. Marcellus let out a tearing scream. Without thinking, he loosened his hand, and the glass fell from his fingers. Without wasting a second, I lifted my leg and kicked him with all my might in the hurt knee. Horrible snap sounded. Marcellus's scream was even sharper than before, an almost inhuman howl. His body lost balance and he fell sideways onto the wet pavement, twisting in pain. I jumped away, stumbling but finally out of his grip. The police used the confusion. Several officers ran toward us and pulled me away from the edge of the bridge. Others jumped on Marcellus, who kicked and tried to grab anything. One of the officers had to shoot him in the other leg when he tried to take his weapon. Everything became confused. Voices, lights, hands. They sat me on the ground, wrapped me in a warm blanket. A medic pressed gauze over the cut on my neck. Said nothing. I just watched as they lifted Marcellus onto a stretcher. Handcuffed, bleeding, his face changed. When he passed by me, our eyes met again. There was no more pride, no feeling of being better, no hate, only pure fear. Maybe for the first time he understood that everything was over. Khalil showed up. A short time later, arm in a sling, face bruised. He came as best he could and put his good arm around me. That moment I finally let myself cry. But my tears were no longer just from pain. They were also from relief. The next day the news talked in detail about the web of corruption and murder involving Marcellus and Mr. Sterling. Pieces of the recordings got out. Pictures of the scandal at the gala. Photos of both in handcuffs. Public opinion turned against them. The district attorney took action. Bank accounts were frozen. Property taken. But the legal punishment was only part of what they deserved. Life or fate took care of the rest. In the prison hospital where Marcellus was taken, doctors found that the leg crushed in the accident had gotten very infected. The mix of glass, mud, and road dirt had put bacteria into his blood. In a matter of hours, the flesh began to rot. To save his life, they had no choice but to cut off his right leg above the knee. When he woke up from the medicine that made him sleep, Marcellus found out he would never walk the same way again. He cried, screamed, begged them to give back what he had lost. It was a brutal twist. He, who had destroyed his own son's body, hurting his organs with poison, now saw his own body cut up. In that hospital bed, tied to a wheelchair, the same person who believed he was unbeatable, who looked down on the weak, saw himself changed forever into what he hated most. Mr. Sterling didn't get away unhurt either. During his first formal talk at the DA's office, the stress spiked his blood pressure. He had a major stroke. He lived, but half his body was left paralyzed. The man who controlled stages with moving speeches, who manipulated politicians and businessmen with his smooth talk, was reduced to making unclear sounds, drooling, stuck in a bed in the prison hospital. His money was taken. His family wanted nothing to do with him because of shame. He came to need strangers' hands, even to eat, and go to the bathroom. It was the total ruin of his pride. Sarah, Marcellus's secretary and girlfriend, tried to run. She was caught at the airport trying to leave the country with jewelry and cash before the investigators got her. She betrayed Marcellus without a second thought, handing over records of money moves and bad emails. She believed that would make her sentence shorter, but she couldn't avoid responsibility for having helped hide the crime and getting money from it. She ended up sentenced to 20 years in prison. In jail, far from expensive suits and fancy hotels, her beauty stopped being a privilege and became a target for jealousy and attacks. Khalil and I followed the news with a mix of satisfied anger and tiredness. We never celebrated their suffering, but we didn't feel sorry for them either. Nothing that happened to them came close to the pain of a child poisoned by his own father, or the terror of a teacher thrown from a third floor for telling the truth. But at least they were no longer untouchable. One day, I was called to the prison hospital to add to my statement. Walking down the guarded hallway, I saw Marcellus through a window, sitting in a wheelchair. He was barely a shadow of the man he was, thinner, older, with a lost stare. When he realized I was there, he slowly turned his head. Our eyes met one more time. He began to cry, silently. His lips moved, trying to form words I couldn't hear. Apologies. Maybe tears that came too late. For the first time I felt no hate, only a calm emptiness, an unbreakable distance. I looked at him for a few seconds, long enough for him to understand that I was still standing, that I had survived everything he tried to ruin. Then I turned around and kept walking. I had nothing more to say to him. 6 months passed since that stormy night on the highway. Though slow, began to close wounds. The scars remained, but they no longer bled. One morning, with a clear sky, I looked at myself in the mirror of my new house. Smaller and simpler than the old one, but full of peace. I put on a soft, cream-colored hijab and smoothed the fabric with firm hands. The woman in the mirror was no longer the mother who could barely stand at her son's funeral. She was someone made tough by tragedy. Yes, but also raised above. Beside me, behind in the reflection, I saw Khalil walk by with a stack of papers and make a silly joke to lighten the mood. That day, the final sentence would be read. In the courtroom, packed with reporters, people from children's groups, and curious people. The air was heavy. I sat in the front row, Khalil, in a suit and with his arm fully healed, sat next to me and took my hand. Then the judges entered. The whispering stopped. Officers pushed Marcellus's wheelchair to the defendant's place. He had his head down. The place next to him was empty. Sterling's lawyer spoke for him because the old man could no longer move. Further away, in another chair, Sarah trembled, pale. The lawyer against them gave a strong review of all the charges. Major murder of a child, murder of a key witness, corruption, stealing money. The head judge, middle-aged woman with serious eyes, began to read the decision. The room held a respectful silence. Her words, though formal, had the force of a stone thrown into water. She said Marcellus was guilty on all charges and, stressing the cruelty and planning of his acts, she gave the highest punishment. Gasps were heard, exclamations, a thank God, barely held back in the back of the room. Marcellus began to shake. He broke down, crying with an ugly, desperate sob that moved no one. Mr. Sterling was given life in prison without the chance of ever getting out. The judge said that although sick, his moral and legal guilt was total. His broken body would spend the rest of the years he had left in a prison bed. Court gave Sarah 20 years in prison. When the judge hit the wooden hammer 3 times, I felt something inside me finally close. The legal part had ended. Leaving the courthouse, the fresh air of the street tasted different. It wasn't complete freedom because nothing would bring Zion back, but it was a first step toward a life in which my son wasn't just a victim, but also a seed of something good. All the money involved in my father's inheritance and in Marcellus and Sterling's plans was gotten back after a long legal process in which Khalil worked his fingers to the bone. The government wanted to keep a big part, but we managed to prove it was Zion's money. Even so, I was clear that I couldn't keep that money for myself. Saw it stained with blood. I decided to turn it into something that honored my son. We found an old building on the edge of the city and completely fixed it up. At the entrance, we hung a colorful sign. Zion's House, Foundation for Child Protection and Education. I wanted that place to be a safe place for abused, hurt, or left alone children, whom no one believed or listened to. A place where they could sleep without fear, study, play, have counselors, teachers, kindness. I walked through the freshly painted halls decorated with children's drawings. In the yard, group of kids played soccer. Others took turns on the swings. Their laughter echoed like a kind sound in my chest. In the main room, we hung a large photograph of Zion smiling, and next to it, one of Miss Vanna. With part of the money, we also paid for the fixing up of the school where she had worked, including a new library named the Vanna Library, so her name would stay linked to education and not tragedy. As evening came, when the sun began to color the sky orange, Khalil and I went to the cemetery. Zion's and Vanna's graves were next to each other under the shade of a magnolia tree with sweet-smelling white flowers that leaned protectively over. The grass was green and neat, decorated with fresh flowers that unknown people left from time to time. I knelt before Zion's headstone, running my fingers over his name carved in the stone. This time there was no hopelessness in my eyes like before. There was missing him, yes, but mixed with a new It's done, my love, I whispered. We got justice. They won't hurt anyone ever again. Your money now helps keep other children safe. You don't have to feel pain anymore. You can play all you want up there. The wind gently moved the branches of the tree, and some white petals fell onto the grave. I closed my eyes and prayed long and deeply, giving God my thanks, my sadness, and my son's whole life. When I finished, I stood up. It was when I saw something at the end of the gravel path. About 30 feet away, in the middle of the golden light of sunset, the shape of a boy appeared. He was wearing pajamas with the picture of Zion's favorite superhero, the same outfit I put on him the last night he spent at home. His hair was messy and his eyes bright as always. He didn't look sick or tired. On the contrary, he glowed with health and joy. Felt no fear. He looked at me with a huge smile, so bright it almost hurt. He raised his right hand and waved at me with a small gesture. Goodbye. And I'm okay, Mom. I felt a single tear slide down my cheek. I waved back with a trembling hand and a smile that for the first time in a long time was real. See you soon, sweetie, I murmured. Zion's shape faded little by little with the light of the setting sun until it disappeared, but the warmth he left in my chest stayed there. He was peace. I could finally accept that I wouldn't hug him again, but also that he wasn't suffering. I turned around. Khalil was waiting for me a few steps back without asking questions. With that silent patience he had always had with me. He held out his hand, took it firmly. We walked out of the cemetery side by side, leaving behind years of pain, fear, and guilt. In front of me, the city turned on its lights one by one as if a new curtain were opening. I had a whole life ahead of me, full of children who would need protection, stories that deserved to be heard, wounds that perhaps I could help heal. I was no longer just the mother who lost her son, nor the betrayed wife. I was Amara, the woman who walked through the storm and stayed standing, founder of Zion's house and defender of children who have no voice. And for the first time in a long time, thinking about the future, I could say in silence, yes. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.